Well, it's my great pleasure to be sitting this afternoon with my friend and colleague, Dr. Jacob Towery. Jacob is a psychiatrist in California, the author of the self-help book, the antidepressant book that helps adolescents help themselves recover from depression. And Dr. Towery is also our 2022 world champion in the shame attacking Olympics that All Things CBT sponsors each year. So we're opening up the 2023 Olympics today. And I thought, what better way than to check in with our champ and hear about his year at the top.
Thank you, Daniel. I'm happy to be here with you. Um, yeah, this is the only thing in the world that I am a world champion at. So it's been fun to be a world champion. I love shame attacking. I think it's so helpful and powerful. I was actually just doing shame attacking exercises with a patient yesterday, and she said that shame attacking had helped her feel liberated and it was somewhat transformative for her. So I think they're so powerful. Um, if you watching this, if you have never done shame attacking exercises, I highly recommend get out and try them and do them. Um, One of the things that has been fun for me is as the reigning champion, it's pushed me to keep doing shame attacking exercises and uh, keep that edge sharp, even if it might be kind of uncomfortable or difficult. I want to really earn my title. So one fun memory that comes up, I think I sent you a picture, Daniel, and I'm open to that being posted if you want to. But I went surfing a few weeks ago, and I was pretty confident that I'd had a spare change of shorts or pants in my duffel bag. And then I finished surfing, I showered, I got totally clean, ready to put on some clothes and go get a little lunch in Santa Cruz, and discovered that I was mistaken. And I had not actually had any spare shorts or pants in my duffel bag. So I thought, well, I could put on my gross, disgusting, wet bathing suit, but that sounds pretty unappealing. So first I put on a shirt and I thought, well, I wonder if there's something that could be kind of close enough. So I don't remember what I had. I think I had maybe another t-shirt or a jacket. I thought, I wonder if I could fashion something kind of kilt-like. Well, first I thought maybe I should just go home. Maybe I should just skip lunch in Santa Cruz and just drive home and be modest, get shorts there. And then I thought it's a beautiful day. It's sunny. It's lovely. A friend of mine was telling me about this place. I think it's called Hula's. I was like, no, I'm the shame attacking world champion. If I can't, do embarrassing things, who can? I should do this. So I fashioned something that was kind of like a short kilt out of maybe another t-shirt and drove over to Hula's and then parked my car. And I got out and I remember thinking, I wonder if I could get arrested for this. This is practically exposure. It's maybe not quite exposure. Well, hopefully it won't happen. So I walked around. There was a farmer's market happening. I walked past farmer's market and came to the restaurant, and I was a little nervous. They might kind of be quite upset with me and offended, but no, they showed me to a table inside, and I sat down. I had a lovely lunch, but I noticed it was kind of chilly inside. They had the air conditioning on, and I thought, oh no, I did have some boxers. Thankfully, I did have some boxers. Okay, so I was sitting on my boxers with like then a shirt. And then I thought, well, it's kind of chilly. I don't really, I think I need this jacket. So I put the jacket on, and then I was just sitting eating lunch in my boxers. It's a delicious lunch. And then I thought after lunch, okay, well, I'll just go back to my car. And I thought, well, this is a nice farmer's market. I should just check out this farmer's market. So I walked through the farmer's market and explored a little. They had some lovely, plants and food, and then there were some flowers. And I thought I should buy my girlfriend some flowers. So I'm walking around in my boxers, this jacket and this shirt. I bought some lovely flowers for my girlfriend. And then I get in my car and I'm like, now it's really time to go home. And then on my way home, I thought, I really need to go to Home Depot very soon because Burning Man's coming up and I need to buy these bins to get on the truck. And the original plan was going to be to go that night with my girlfriend. And I was like, well, it's on the way. I think I could just push myself a little bit. So I parked at Home Depot and I um, walked in my boxers and explored the different, 17, 27 gallon bins. Great deal, by the way. They're like $11. You get this huge, like yellow and black bin. So I bought a couple of those and a soda. And I think the woman who was checking me out was like a little, I don't know, maybe confused. Were these shorts? Were these just boxers? But she let me pay and I walked out. And then I thought, Daniel might enjoy this story. Maybe I'll get a picture. So I was going to do a selfie. And then I thought, it's really hard to get all this stuff in the selfie. So there was a woman standing there. I said, excuse me, would you be willing to take my picture? And she was like, okay. So she took my phone and I got a picture of me in my boxers with all the bins. And that was my story.
All hail to the chief. Well, thanks, Jacob, for inspiring me yet again to get out on the cutting edge of right and wrong, freedom, choice, public opinion. It's a wonderful place to be, right there on the edge of things. We usually think of shame as inhibiting individual behavior. So if we're at the beach and we realize, oh my God, I don't have what I was planning to wear to lunch, we might not go to lunch. Or I've struggled with public speaking anxiety and shame about my trembling voice and my pale face and that kind of thing. And for many years, that inhibited my behavior of standing up in public settings and saying things. There's also a political aspect to this particular emotion. And I was thinking we could take a look at that here today. So we humans are at the same time the most social and the most violent beings on Earth. And this dual nature has presented us a dilemma because our violent impulses could make it impossible for us to live in families, live in kinship groups without killing each other off. So nature's answer to the dilemma was the development of what we call legacy emotions that include guilt and shame and anxiety that pump the brakes on displays of aggression or rule breaking, standing outside what we perceive to be the norm for our group within our in-groups. Sadly, it does not inhibit us at all when it comes to attacking other people, but it allows us to live as families or as neighborhoods. And nature has selected for this particular emotion. So this emotion was very early on co-opted by religious and political authority. And this was not about inhibiting behavior at the individual level. It was about social control. So we live still in a largely Judeo-Christian society. And shame is the first emotion mentioned in the Bible. I think it's chapter 2 of Genesis. So we see many remnants of this legacy today in our Judeo-Christian society. I was reading this morning about a, quote, disgraced financier, close quotes. And I realized I see that a lot, that someone is held up to public ridicule and shame with language like that in newspapers or social media posts. So the disgraced is an invitation to look in a critical, hostile way at someone who has stepped outside the norms. And it's also a reminder to the rest of us that if we misstep, we too could be on public display in the same way. So one of the very early forms of shaming in public display was placing people in stocks. It's a punishment and a warning, and it's principally been used through time against working and indigenous peoples. So in the 1350s, England passed a statute of laborers that prescribed the use of stocks for, quotes, unruly artisans, closed quotes. In other words, working people who didn't take kindly to the rules that were handed to them by the aristocracy. And that statute actually required that every town and village in England erect a set of stocks. So to have that omnipresent warning, you, my friend, could end up right here, should you be an unruly working person. The Spanish conquistadors brought this practice to the New World, and they used it against indigenous people. That tradition continued on in South America into the 19th century and was used, for instance, to punish indigenous miners for rebelling against their bosses and the capital interests that controlled those mines. And this is not all ancient history. So in 1989, there was a town in Arkansas that passed a curfew law for miners and prescribed the parents spending 2 days in the stocks if their child broke the curfew.
Wow.
Now, after the town passed the law, they realized we don't have stocks and we don't really have the money to buy stocks. So the law was very short-lived. But that impulse to make an example, in this case, not of the offender, but of the parents of the offender, is something that travels with us today. So I was thinking of this earlier this year when I read that Daniel Ellsberg had died. Daniel Ellsberg was very much a figure in my growing up. If you don't know that name, he was a very high-level Pentagon employee and one of the architects of the Vietnam War. He also worked for the Rand Corporation in similar capacities. So Ellsberg helped draft a highly classified 7,000-page document that came to be known as the Pentagon Papers. And that document revealed that the US government that had been prosecuting the war in Vietnam for 6 or 7 years at that time knew it was very unlikely that war could ever be won. It also revealed that the Johnson administration had systematically lied about the war and the prospects for the war, both to the US public and to Congress. So now Ellsberg, who is a very bright guy, felt this existential conflict. He and his colleagues now understood the truth about the war. He also began feeling tremendous fear that should he publicly stand with the opposition to the war, that he would be ostracized, shamed, and very likely imprisoned by the military-industrial complex. So this person who had been very much part of the institution that had created and prosecuted the war was now thinking, you know, those peaceniks and hippies and pinkos have something very important. And a big part of who he was wanted to stand in opposition to the war instead of on the side of prosecuting the war. So all of this came to a head for him one weekend, I think it was about 1968 or something, when he attended a talk by a peace activist, Randy Keller. And Keller was talking about nonviolence as a way of life. I think there was a strong Gandhian influence in that community at that time. And in listening to Keller and talking to some of the war resistors, Ellsberg realized there's a different path forward, and a path that actually looked like a much more human and viable path than the one that he'd been on. So in listening to Keller talk, Ellsberg experienced a full-on panic attack. He wrote about this years later, began hyperventilating, feeling like he was going to throw up, pass out. And this went on for hours. And then eventually he just broke down and wept. He went into a men's room where he could be by himself and he just sobbed and experienced this catharsis as he realized, okay, I'm ready to make the break. I'm ready to stand against this war that I have been prosecuting. And this set the stage for, I think it was less than a year later, he copied those 7,000 pages and leaked them to the New York Times. And that shame attack produced exactly the effects that he anticipated. His community turned against him. He was charged with espionage, and the public's view of the war experienced a sea change. More and more people began to believe that this was an unjust and unwinnable war, and that change in public opinion certainly shortened the war and changed the course of American history. So this dimension, this political dimension, is something that has been on my mind since. And it has shown up in my work with patients who, for example, have experienced sexual assault. So they have been the victims of a crime. And then find themselves unwilling to report the crime and prosecute the perpetrator because of feelings of immense shame. And it's painful for me to sit with such a patient and watch their silence, to my eye, enable those powerful people and institutions, in this case, misogynist institutions, to continue to go on and grind up other lives. So this shame of standing up for truth, for life, for the well-being of all beings, against very, very powerful and punitive forces of social control, is something that I'm very interested in doing. I have done civil disobedience. I have been arrested. My name has been in the paper. I've been convicted of crimes. And I have felt that that's very important for me to have done, because to live silently with tremendous injustice and threats is not congruent with my value system. And maybe my speaking to this dynamic here today is another example of my wanting to engage our communities in a conversation about what's going on and what are we going to accept and look the other way. And what is it that we're willing to do publicly, sometimes at great cost to ourselves, to stand in alignment with our value system and our truth. So that's a lot of holding forth. And I would love to hear, Jacob, what comes up for you as we talk together about shame and politics, shame, social control, shame in the media.
Yeah, I think that was a really nice way, Daniel, of wrapping in ways that shame can play out in a variety of different settings and institutions and across politics. I share with you a sadness that shame is often used as a method of control. I don't know that I could count the number of patients that have come to me saying that they feel that were raised, in a Judeo-Christian faith and have come to me saying that they feel deeply ashamed that they, for example, had attraction to a person that they weren't supposed to be attracted to, or were attracted to someone that they were not married to, and thought that meant they were a bad person and they were, there's something wrong with them. And it was very rewarding to help them see, oh, I think that means that you're a human person with a human brain that has very little control over who you're attracted to. And the shame is completely optional. Even the guilt is completely optional in that case. And I also resonated when you were talking about victims of sexual assault. That's something that I'm fairly passionate about, and I feel very sad that so many of these assaults just happen and people kind of get away with them. And I think it's a combination of these cases are so rarely prosecuted and so rarely successfully prosecuted. I can't remember the exact statistic, but I think the last time I read it, it was something like out of 1,000 people who were forcibly sexually assaulted, 6 resulted in a successful prosecution or something. It's insanely low. And then that's sad, because then that makes other women and other people hesitant to come forth and spend all the time dealing with the antagonism, dealing with people questioning them, dealing with people trying to make them at fault and reliving all of those horrible things. So I think that's part of it. But also, like you said, I think there are people that sadly blame themselves. Well, was it because I was wearing this? Was it because I had a patient? Was it because I went to his house? Was it because I had a drink? Was it my fault? And it's very sad to me when it's just quite clear that it's not someone's fault, and yet they're the one taking on the blame and the shame. And I think it comes down to there's still so much misogyny. There's still so much slut shaming. There's still so much of a double standard around men are studs if they have sex, and women are sluts and they're somehow bad, that they've had sexual urges or a desire to be expressive with their clothes. I think it's ridiculous and absurd and hugely problematic. Yeah, those are a few of my initial thoughts and reactions.
I felt horrified when you shared that statistic with me, that in this country at this time, the successful prosecution of a crime that the last I looked, maybe 1 in 3 women have experienced, and perhaps as many as 1 in 3 men, though men tend to underreport sexual assault. So the official numbers are, I believe, still somewhat lower than they are for women. But that the system itself is a form of stocks. So if you make a claim against someone, you will be placed in the stocks. You will be on public display. And your character will be called into question. And you will certainly be re-traumatized, reliving in a public setting the assault that you've experienced. And you will certainly be held up to ridicule and attack. So from the very early days in the wooden stocks, the community was invited to participate in verbal and physical assault of the person. Children were recruited to come in and take off the person's shoes and tickle their feet. Friends and neighbors were invited to come and yell things at the person and throw things at them. And it seems that particularly via social media, there's a kind of invitation to pile on. If someone stands up for themselves, we see this very recently in very public trials of ex-presidents, people like that. If someone stands by the truth, they become a target for verbal, physical assault as well. And I think that's expressive of the fact that the culture itself continues to trade in violence against vulnerable populations, women, children, people of color, minorities of all kinds. And I have seen that there's this undertow that's present, not just in social media, but maybe particularly there, to join in the punishment of people who would stand against that system and apply additional pressure to get them to shut up, to step back into line, to not notice or not talk about what's going on.
Yeah, I totally agree. Something that I have found disturbing on social media, which I think became much more prevalent maybe in the last 7 or 8 years, is this concept of calling people out. And I would see more on like my Facebook feed, someone saying like, I want to call out so-and-so. They did this thing. And sometimes they'd even have a picture. They'd often put the person's full name and say, they did this thing. And kind of inviting everyone to say, they're a horrible person and they're so terrible. And let's all agree how awful they are and let's ostracize them. And this started happening more and more and more. And I thought, this is really disturbing. I would be so frightened to be on the receiving end of this. No trial, just kind of a, let's all agree that they're horrible. And then thankfully, one of the communities I was in said, do we need to do this? Does this need to be our method of dealing with anger and upset? Could we instead kind of call people in? Like if someone has done something we're upset about, could we talk to them more privately and say, hey, you did this thing, you know, I'm upset or this person's upset. Let's talk about it. What was going on for you? Why did you do this? How can we change this moving forward? But without that public shame component, I think public shame is almost never really the solution to practically anything. So yeah, I feel sad that that's kind of can be a go-to mechanism for people.
I read recently that one of the engineers who'd left one of the big social media platforms had gone public with some algorithms that fed exactly that dynamic that you're talking about. If someone signaled in something that they had posted that they were interested in calling out, what they would be shown would be posts that would encourage them and inflame them and enrage them and lead them to this rush down the rabbit hole of canceling so-and-so, or everyone agreeing this is a person that's beyond the pale now, that we will no longer consider a member of the human family. I had not heard of calling in, but when you said that, it reminded me of a tradition that I experienced in Hawaii. It was, of course, an indigenous tradition called Ho'oponopono. And it's a community practice that I think could translate as making things right. So, for instance, if an adolescent had committed a crime, the community would come together, and it would include the adolescent, it would include the victim or victims of the crime, it would include the family and extended family on both sides. It would include significant religious or civic figures in the community, and they would work something out. And the working out, I think, would include a hearing from all parties what their experience was, and then a kind of consensus in the community about restitution. If it was determined that someone had been violated or a law had been broken, there would be a communal response that would be aimed at setting things right, not excluding someone or banning someone or canceling someone, but reconciling all parties into the ongoing community life. So something in that direction sounds a lot more human and viable and life-giving than this trend that I think we're both saying we're seeing, at least in the United States, of basically just putting people in stocks and throwing stuff at them.
Yeah, totally. What you're describing sounds, I don't know a lot about restorative justice, but it sounds a little bit like this topic of restorative justice, that to give someone the benefit of the doubt, to assume that if they make an error that it wasn't malicious, it doesn't mean they're a horrible sociopath, that there might be things they could do to make amends to the person they've harmed. And then hopefully things are kind of fine. And reserving things like exile and public shame for more people who are kind of repeatedly doing things that are horrible or seemingly deliberately doing things that are malicious and awful. So yeah, I think erring on the side of letting people make amends is often a good thing. Yeah.
I am reminded again of how it does me good to have time with you. I'm also aware our time's winding down here, and I wonder if you have any closing remarks to our listeners and colleagues on the topic of shame attacking justice, and finding a human way forward in these very challenging times.
Yeah, thank you for that opportunity. I was just talking with a patient about this topic yesterday in a way, and my conclusion with him, our conclusion, was that often the best you can do is to do what you think is right, and then the chips fall where they may, and people will see you how they'll see you, and public opinion will be what public opinion is. But you do your best to do what seems right, moral, legitimate, and then people have their own opinions. So I think that one of the great things about shame attacking is we can learn how to take public opinion less personally and be less bothered if someone has judgment of us, and coupling that with a desire to do good in the world and to be thoughtful about our actions, but with less care about people judging us. So that to me is the most fantastic thing about shame attacking exercises, is that when we haven't done anything that's been harmful to anyone, to be able to let go of the fear of judgment of others and other people's opinion. And I think it's truly transformative and liberating. And it's nice to walk through like, I just got back from a week at Burning Man, and radical self-expression is one of the 10 principles. And people wore these incredible outfits and huge wings and gold everything and beautiful headdresses. And some people were naked and other people had shiny things. And it was just so much more fun that people weren't letting shame and embarrassment get in the way. They just thought, I want to live large, I want to live life to the fullest, and people will think whatever they think. I think life is more fun and rich that way. So I like that we can do our little part to help promote that in the world.
Oh, thanks, Jacob, for wearing the crown here the last year and doing it proud, from what I can tell, and helping me set the stage for the opening of the 2023 World Championships of Shame Attacking. When you are ready to submit your entry, you can go to www.shameattacking.com and view the entries from years past, including Jacob's winning entry last year, and post your own. So we'll look forward to that human creativity and fun getting expressed yet again in our contests this year.
Thanks for having me, Daniel.